On this episode of the Motorsport Recently Show.
Yes, that's right. The guy who is now a team principal was given a lifetime ban from all FIA-sanctioned motorsports.
I don't think he should be allowed anywhere near a television.
And I think if you're walking into any job and people are already thinking about replacing you, that's not going to instill confidence at all.
I'm just stirring the hate column.
Hello everybody and welcome along to what could be, if we do end up being sued at the end of this episode, the final episode of the Motorsport Recently Show. My name is Jack McKenzie, the owner of this here YouTube channel, and joining me on the mic, as usual, is our sim racing commentator, Caitlin Penny Commentary, and our in-house motorsport guru, the wonderful Chris Whitfield. This is going to be an interesting episode because, as you have likely seen from the title, I suspect I would have called this episode something along the lines of the Alpine episode. That will be a note for my future self in editing. Before the chaos ensues, guys, welcome along. How's everybody going at the moment?
Thank you very much, Jack. I'm doing okay, thank you very much. I've built a little Lego F1 car the last couple of days. I've got this one, my partner's got the Ferrari, so we've got these to display for ourselves. We've also been to a classic car run, and we've got plenty of pictures that are coming out very soon of all of the classic cars and stuff. I found out that my partner is violently attracted to Mark I Ford Escorts, and there were also a lot of Minis and Austin 7s and all sorts of classics. So yeah, I'm in a good place. How about you, Chris?
First of all, your partner is a person of culture, because your partner likes the Mark I Escort, an excellent vehicle, if I do say so myself.
Should we get into the story which we've alluded to already, which is, of course, a major Formula One story, and that is the shake-up at Alpine, which has occurred in the last couple of days.
To say the least.
To say the least, there we go. This is going to be a long one. It all sort of kicked off with Oliver Oakes resigning with immediate effect as team principal from Alpine, with Flavio Briatore, who I believe his previous job title was like special advisor, which everybody said was essentially team principal in all but name, or at least speculated that that was the case. And he has basically stepped in to take over Oliver Oakes' previously performed duties. And shortly after that, it was finally confirmed that Jack Doohan was being dropped for at least the next 5 rounds as one of the team's drivers at Alpine, with Franco Colapinto on loan from Williams to begin racing with the team from Imola. Now, Doohan's sidelining comes after what has been, to say the least, a difficult start to the 2024 season, which yielded, unfortunately, 0 points for the Australian driver from the first 6 weekends. And Colapinto, who was loaned to Alpine by Williams, replaced Logan Sargent at the end of last year in 2024 under what was fairly similar circumstances, albeit it came a lot later in the season. So he raced 9 races at the end of 2024, retiring in 3 of those, but walked away from that with 5 points, which was actually 4 more points than Sargent has scored in his entire Formula One career up to that point. And Colapinto also brings with him quite considerable financial backing to Alpine. Now, without resorting to either name-calling or defamatory comments or anything that may result in adverse consequences, what do we think of what has happened in the last couple of days?
Holds my tongue, holds my tongue, holds my tongue.
Okay.
Go.
Well, we'll get to Chris, because Chris, I know you've got a lot to say about this, but I will start if that's okay. So obviously, everything I'm saying here is entirely my opinion, and that is also a defense to defamation, Flavio. But yeah, okay. So, in my personal opinion, Flavio Briatore belongs absolutely nowhere near a Formula One team. Mm-hmm. To anyone who may not be familiar with what happened with Flavio Briatore, Gentlemen, a short view back to the past. Singapore 2008. Renault were in a tough situation. Renault, of course, run the team that runs out of the factory in Enstone, that is now known as Alpine. They were in a tough run of form, and they were worried about losing sponsors. And to counter that, Flavio Briatore hatched up a plan, along with a couple of other senior figures at Renault, to basically fix the race. He caused a crash, basically told the team's second driver, Nelson Piquet Jr., to crash on purpose. He did so. Fernando Alonso took advantage of the resulting safety car and ended up winning the race. Initially, when this was discovered, Flavio Briatore was given a lifetime ban from Formula One. Yes, that's right. The guy who is now a team principal was given a lifetime ban from Formula One and all FIA-sanctioned motorsports. That was then silently overturned in a French court to not much fanfare whatsoever. Like, barely anyone reported on this, but it technically happened. And ever since then, he's been worming his way back in, and now he's in charge of a Formula One team. And I personally think that is absolutely despicable. It really shows that if you're powerful enough and if you're popular enough, any kind of punishment can be overturned. Any kind of punishment doesn't really mean anything. And also, I'm getting fed up of contracts meaning nothing in Formula One. There have been so many opportunities where teams have given a driver a contract basically just to spur them on, even though they don't intend to uphold that contract at all. You know, I'm not sure if there was actually a contract signed, but it was only a couple of weeks ago we were talking about Jack Doohan and his seat being safe until the summer, because that was the news coming out of the Alpine camp. And then they've turned around after all of that and gone, actually, you suck, we're getting rid of you. Like, that's not good. And okay, I'm exaggerating. He is still the reserve driver, and they haven't actually gotten rid of Jack Doohan. And there is a chance, if Franco Colapinto struggles in these next 5 races, that Doohan could end up getting his seat back. However, I just think that if you're going to sign a driver, you've got to stick with them. You've got to support them a little bit. But Jack Doohan, he was doomed before the start, you know? He was signed up, and then immediately they set about looking to replace him. Does basic decency mean nothing in Formula One nowadays? It's just despicable. The whole Alpine situation is terrible, and anyone who allowed this to happen should be ashamed of themselves.
I think you are definitely correct on the whole contract front. And I don't think it would have instilled any sort of confidence at all. And I think that actually might have something to do with Jack Doohan's run of form at the start of the season. Because basically, even after only a single race, because I think his first race was filling in for Esteban Ocon last year. Already at that point, even one race in, before he'd even really started his full-time Formula One career, the conversations had already begun. And I think if you're walking into any job and people are already thinking about replacing you, that's not going to instill confidence at all. And confidence is, of course, a very important thing when it comes to racing cars. So I think you're certainly right. He would have been probably disadvantaged from the outset, especially in the mental game, knowing that his seat wasn't safe really ever. And I do have to agree with you. It is very bizarre that we were talking about Jack Doohan's seat is safe, and only a couple of episodes later, he is out of a drive for now.
It was one episode ago.
Was it really one
episode ago?
Yeah.
In fairness, we were supposed to record last week, but I was busy. So, but yeah, no, it's absolutely wild. But as you said, there is the possibility that when they do the reevaluation, which is of course going to be after 5 races, that Jack Doohan could be brought back. But for some reason, that seems to me unlikely, regardless of what actually happens. Chris. And you've been waiting for this moment.
And breathe. I'm trying this new meditation thing. First of all, to Caitlin's point about Briatore not being allowed in an F1 paddock, I don't think he should be allowed anywhere near a television that is broadcasting anything run by Formula One management. I don't think he should be allowed anywhere near the same country where a Grand Prix is held. And I think that, well, first of all, this whole thing with Ollie Oakes, the fact that he resigned, I use air quotations, because let's face it, he was forced out. He was forced out because he wanted to keep doing, and Flavio wanted his pay driver to take over. My point is, Jack Doohan, to Jack's point, was doomed from the start. Because when they chose to accept Colapinto's money at in December, Doohan was a lame duck at that point. He's like, he finally gets this great opportunity to run a Formula One Grand Prix, and then all of a sudden, there's Colapinto failing upwards. The whole contract situation, Flavio wanted him in that ride sooner. But Jack Doohan was in the way. That's what really pisses me off about this whole thing, because Flavio Briatore, when I heard that he was taking over in name only, like all but in name only, because let's face it, he ascended himself. When I heard that he was taking over yesterday for Ollie Oakes, I'm like, you should have seen that. There's a vein right here. There's also a vein on my neck that began to throb, and I'm just stirring. To quote Hinch and Townsend Bell, I'm just stirring the hate cauldron. The hate cauldron hath been stirred.
So, Jack, before this podcast started, myself and Chris were talking about this, and we seem to have different opinions on Franco Colapinto. So, I would like to bring this to the podcast and just say, I really don't think we should be taking this out on Franco. I think drivers do what is right for their career. You know, it's like I remember saying this to people when Robert Kubica was in Formula One in 2019 in the Williams. Yeah, okay, he had a terrible year, but I still think that he did a very good job to get back into Formula One in the first place. And there were people who were saying, oh, he's a talentless hack and he should never have been let near a Formula One car. And, you know, they seem to really be taking it out on him. And I don't think that's fair. And it's the same with It's the same with Colapinto. You can be annoyed at how Jack Doohan was treated, and you can think that the situation was dealt with poorly, but Franco is just he's running his own race, you know? And, you know, I know you brought up earlier, Chris, this tweet that he did when he posted, basically there's like a bat signal with the number 43, and he says, "Buen dia," you know, and and you were saying that was distasteful. I think it's natural for a driver to celebrate getting a seat in Formula One, and I don't see that as distasteful. I would also like to say, I actually think Jack Doohan did a really good job last year.
He did.
Yeah, okay. He wrote off a couple of chassis, and that was really what they needed him not to do, considering...
Wait, do you mean Colapinto?
Yeah,
Colapinto.
Yeah.
Although Doohan did do a race and actually finished it.
Sorry, yeah, no, I meant Colapinto did a good job last year. We were discussing the race in Baku before this, Chris, where you said he gained points simply through attrition. But also, you have to remember how good he was the race before that. You know, his F1 debut, he was very nearly in the points. And then, of course, the USA, he was in the points again with 10th position. Franco Colapinto, I didn't think he had it until he raced in Formula One. You know, when I saw him joining Formula One, I assumed that he was going to be a talentless pay driver. But he very much impressed me last year, and I think his points for Williams were probably more valuable than the total of damage that he picked up in his accidents. I really believe that Franco Colapinto has talent. Does he have more talent than Jack Doohan? That's debatable. I think they're both very good drivers. And yeah, like Doohan deserved more of a chance, but I do genuinely think that Colapinto is going to be good for the team. I just think that's going to come in a competitive sense rather than a political sense, as obviously the stability of that team is all over the shop.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I was actually gonna, I will probably expand on the stability of the Enstone team in a second. But I do actually have to agree with you. Yes, he did write off a few of those cars, but let's not forget one of those cars that he did write off was in a soaking wet Brazilian Grand Prix where everybody struggled, and other talented drivers.
How do you lose it on the straight? How do you lose it on a straight?
Aquaplaning.
But the thing is, the straight at Brazil isn't straight. So it was the start-finish straight that he crashed on, wasn't it? People have crashed there before. Very talented drivers have crashed there in similar conditions before.
Kimi Raikkonen's crashed there. Kimi, one of the best drivers in history. And,
Max Verstappen went round there too.
Water runs down the track there. It runs down the hill. You can very easily aquaplane there.
Yeah, and I think he did score 5 points, which that is certainly a result, considering that his replacement scored only a single point for the year and a half that he was at Williams. He may not be perfect, but then again, he hasn't raced that many times. And I think you are certainly right, Caitlin. It wouldn't be fair to bully Colapinto over this, particularly because the problems more so lie with that organization as it stands. And it has been a bit of a sinking ship in the last few years. Yeah. So Oaks now joins a long list of people to leave Team Enstone in recent years. And I've got a little list here that I've written in my show notes that I've compiled from stuff that was written on Speed Cafe and stuff that was written on the race. So at the time of writing, I should also mention at the time of writing the show notes and at the time of recording this podcast, no obvious reason has been officially cited for Oliver Oaks' departure.
I have a theory.
You have a theory, but not an actually cited reason. We know that you have a theory, Chris. That has been made abundantly clear by this point. But
I was going to say as well, the official reason for Oaks leaving the team is nothing to do with Colapinto. It has
everything to do with Flavio.
It's also officially it's nothing to do with Briatore. We can speculate, and to be honest, I'm with you here, Chris. I do believe that it was to do with Briatore. I believe the two of them were not compatible. And I also think some of that, maybe even a large part of that, was due to the difference in opinions on drivers. We know that Oaks was very willing to give Jack Doohan more of a try. But at the same time, we can't say that for 100% certainty because that's not official, you know?
No, yeah, it's not official. But it should also be noted that the problems at this team had already begun before Briatore joined the team again in 2024. That's not to say that Briatore is in no way responsible, but there is a long-running history of problems at Enstone in the last couple of years. So I've compiled a little list of people that have left the team within the last few years. So I think all of this sort of started with Cyril Abiteboul, who was the managing director at the time, departing. He was then followed by Marcin Budkowski, who was the executive director. Fernando Alonso, as a driver, he left. Oscar Piastri, who was the reserve driver at the time, he's left the team.
Who, by the way, now it seems like he's dodged a bullet.
Sure.
He's not just dodged a bullet. He's dodged a massive missile.
We'll talk more about that,
He's dodged a missile.
We'll definitely talk about that. So Esteban Ocon left the team. Laurent Rossi, who was the chief executive officer at the time of his departure, left as well. Otmar Safnauer, former team principal, he left as well. Alan Permain, sporting director, he left. Alain Prost, who at the time of his departure was a non-executive director, he left. I think he left shortly in the wake of Cyril Abiteboul's departure. Bruno Famin, he was the team principal as well. Pat Fry, chief technical officer, and Matt Harmon, technical director, are all high-profile personnel within the team that has left Alpine or Team Enstone and Renault, as it was before, within the last few years. So obviously a very, very turbulent situation at that team at the moment, and it does seem to be a bit of a sinking ship, to say the very least.
Yeah, there's not really another way of looking at it. There is obviously chaos behind the scenes. It reminds me of Red Bull. It's a very similar situation. I heard I watched a video by The Race earlier on where they said that up until now, it was basically as if Oliver Oakes was the Christian Horner of the team and Flavio Briatore was the Helmut Marko. Yeah, it's very much like if Helmut Marko took over Red Bull. We can imagine what a disaster that would be. People will be quick to point out that Flavio Briatore has won championships in the past with his drivers back in the Benetton days and in the Renault days, but that doesn't mean it's going to translate into the modern day. Formula One is very different now. The political climate of sport and the world is very different now. It worries me that people with power like Flavio Briatore keep being able to basically overcome anything just because they're determined enough. This is another thing I was saying to Chris before the start of the podcast. It's a really sad situation for the world as well, that determined old men will just get into positions because they want to. We've seen this in sport, we've seen this in politics, we've seen this in our own lives. Flavio Briatore is just the latest of all of that. I am very much opposed to his involvement in motorsports, and I would like him to be banned.
In fairness, you have to stretch all the way back to 1991. Let's recap historically. There was the Moreno-Schumacher affair, in which he basically forced Roberto Moreno out of the second Benetton seat to put Schumacher in, stealing him from Eddie Jordan. There was the collusion against McLaren to get Ford engines, to get the factory Ford engines in '93. Then there was the option 13, the basically illegal in name only, all but in name only B194. Then there was the buying Ligier in order to steal their Renault engines debacle. And that was just 91 to 94. He's also he fired Martin Brundle in 92, then tried to fire Riccardo Patrese or force him into retirement. Let's see. There was option 13. I mentioned option 13.
Yeah, you did. Don't forget the illegal fuel pump thing they had going on in '94 that nearly killed several Benetton mechanics at Hockenheim.
Yep. Yeah, nearly killed several Benetton mechanics and almost fried and almost burnt Jos Verstappen to a crisp in pit lane.
There's an alternate history to be explored.
And that's just the years 1991 to 1994.
Yeah.
He also fired Jenson Button because he didn't like him, or he didn't much care for him, in '02, I think?
Yeah, I've read Jenson Button's book. I don't think he was technically fired, but he was rather shafted, for sure. Jenson said that Flavio very much always preferred Fisichella and Trulli, which is funny because Trulli also ended up getting fired, but there you go.
Yeah, then there was the Jarno Trulli affair as well. Fired him with no just cause. To put Jacques Villeneuve in the car for some reason. So, and then, as we said before, Crashgate. And apparently some spying with McLaren or something to that effect? I watched Aidan Millward's video the morning we did this, so I was just catching up on that. But corrupt old man in the sport where he shouldn't be. So
And I think, to be having said all of that, because that is a long list of, I think, quite justifiable reasons of why Flavio probably shouldn't be in Formula One. Again, I'm being quite careful with this, but I think the fact that he was then hired back to that Alpine team also is indicative of a problem higher up within the Renault group, because a name that's come up quite a lot in the last, well, since this recent debacle all kicked off, because again, bear in mind the problems at Team Enstone have been going on for a few years now. A name that keeps coming up is the Renault CEO Luca Di Maio. So Briatore is effectively Di Maio's plant. So Di Maio effectively brought Briatore back into that Alpine team. He was also the man responsible for killing off the Alpine factory engine, or I should say Renault factory engine program. He has said he isn't going to sell the Alpine team, and I think not yet. And I think the reason for that is quite obvious, and that is because of how much that the branding of Team Enstone to Alpine has actually done for the Alpine performance brand. Because let's be honest, it was about 4 years ago, the vast majority of the general public didn't know what an Alpine was. Unless you were into French rally cars from the 1960s, you were unlikely to know what an Alpine was. So Alpine brought that brand name into the popular imagination. And the reason I bring all of this up is because Di Maio is ultimately a road car man, and he manages road car brands within that Renault group, and he's previously worked for large automotive groups before. And I think when road car people start making decisions related to Formula One teams, it can create a bit of a problem, because sometimes it's fairly obvious that certain individuals from certain professional backgrounds don't quite understand how managing a Formula One team actually works.
See, also, Audi.
So for instance, we've seen this before, back when Niki Lauda was running Jaguar. Niki Lauda is obviously a Formula One person and understood how Formula One worked. Ford weren't happy with the fact that Niki Lauda and Jaguar weren't producing results almost immediately, so Niki Lauda was fired.
As was Bobby Rahal.
Yeah, and so I think when road car people see that the Formula One team isn't necessarily performing, I think they're very quick to say, well, why isn't it performing? It's obviously the people at the top. We need to fire them all now. And that is what is probably what has happened several times at this team within the last couple of years. I don't think people are being given enough of a chance, because we obviously had the list that I read off before. A lot of those people left after about a year and a half. So they're not really being given enough time. And as we know, if you're going to bring a Formula One team to the front, it is a long, ongoing process where stable leadership is absolutely key. And something that has certainly not been present at Alpine in the last few years is stable leadership. Briatore certainly has something to do with that in recent times, but I think overarching problems within the organization have caused massive issues for that team. And it was exactly the political environment that allowed Briatore to be rehired in the first place.
Essentially, they're desperate. So that's why they brought him back. First of all, like I said, he shouldn't be allowed near a television that carries a Grand Prix, let alone be anywhere on, like, in a Formula One paddock. But the thing is, I've mentioned his problems since becoming a team principal. The company is very desperate. I don't even know if they're still going to be doing the North America expansion that they've been planning for a while. Although that might actually be kind of tied to the WEC program, like the sports program, but like the World Endurance team, because that's, I think, a different arm of Alpine, but I'm not really sure.
I don't think they're hugely connected, because I think the Formula One program is run exclusively by Enstone, but Alpine were running around in sports cars long before it ever became a Formula One team.
I hope I'm wrong. I hope I'm wrong about Colapinto. I hope I am. But I saw last year a guy that was totally out of his element in a Grand Prix car. And I know I'm going to get a lot of flack from that. I'm going to give him a little bit of a chance. I know I said I wouldn't. But the second he crashes, yes, I will be kind of gloating. If he bins it in the gravel, if he puts it in the gravel trap in the first practice at Imola, I'll probably say something.
You got to give him more of a chance, though. That's what they did with Jack Doohan, you know.
The problem was Jack Doohan was under contract. Jack Doohan still has a contract. It's not Doohan's fault that Flavio Briatore is not holding up is actually breaching his contract.
I can't say I agree with everything you're saying about Colapinto. I do think it's also worth noting that Jack Doohan's contract was, I believe, on a race-by-race basis after race 4. So technically, I don't think there has been a breach of contract. I think that's important to say, just in case anyone's watching along and does feel particularly litigious. But I still, while there may not have been a breach of contract, I think there was definitely a breach of ethics. Of trust, breach of ethics, absolutely. And I think that's what I'm more annoyed about. I know I brought up contracts earlier on, but I think I was wrong to do so. I'm just saying, there have been too many situations recently, like with Sergio Perez, for example, where teams have given a driver a contract just to spur them on, with no intention of upholding that contract whatsoever.
Yeah.
Just that's what annoys me. But I don't believe that Jack Doohan did actually have a contract for this next race.
And as for Jack, yes, I feel really bad for him. I hope that he can come out the end of this better, because he actually did outqualify Gasly in Miami.
Yeah.
He did outqualify him on pace.
Yeah, Jack Doohan's a good driver. And, just because he had a tough start to the season. I'm always seeing Formula One fans seeing a driver struggling and just resorting immediately to, that guy's washed, or that guy's no good, or whatever. And we are way too trigger happy as fans to say that sometimes. But you've got to also keep in mind just how good these drivers actually are just to be in Formula One in the first place. There is only one driver in the 20 plus years that I've been watching Formula One that I can say, okay, there are two drivers I can say were genuinely not good drivers, with those being Taki Inoue and Nikita Mazepin. Not Taki Inoue, sorry. Yuji Ida, because Inoue was a little before my time. But yeah,
in fairness, Inoue leaned into the he leaned into the bad driver trope. It was
he was before my time.
Yeah,
I'll link your video to Inoue in the either in the description or in the.
We named a trophy after him.
The Inoue trophy, but of course, aside from those two drivers that I've just brought up, there are no bad drivers in Formula One. There are no sub-average drivers in Formula One. Even drivers who people tend to make fun of, Lance Stroll, Nicholas Latifi, Romain Grosjean, Pastor Maldonado, even those guys are above average drivers. It's just that they happen to be above average in an extremely above average sport. Does that make sense?
Yeah. No, it does. And let's not forget, Jack Doohan was still third in Formula 2. You have to have some talent to do that. And everybody that was just mentioned there, they all were very successful within their own fields. They were all very successful in junior categories, because these days you don't get to Formula 1 without at least some degree of success.
Wasn't Ricardo Rosset a Formula 3000 champion or something like that?
I don't think he was
second in F3000.
Yeah, I don't think he was champion, but I'm sure he had some level of junior category success before getting into F1. what happened after that is anyone's guess, but
I don't really know how you fix that other than stable leadership, but again, I don't know how you fix that without a clean slate, and it is a massive problem. And to be honest, if Alpine want to turn this around, they really, really need to address some of the issues that they have at the moment. I think you mentioned before, I mean, like race by race contracts, I think that sets the wrong precedent as well. It's just everything seems to be the incorrect decision at the moment.
It's like they were only placating him. They were basically just placating him. It's like I said before at the beginning. It's like I said at the beginning of the piece. Colapinto was Flavio's choice because he had money. The problem was Jack Doohan was in the way because he was already signed in.
But it makes you wonder why they've only given Colapinto a 5-race contract. Because it was very clear, even from the end of last year, when they bought Colapinto out of his Williams contract, paid a lot of money for Colapinto. And everyone was saying, well, you don't just do that to put him on the sidelines. They're going to put him in the race seat before, as soon as they possibly can. It was pretty clear that was going to happen. However, he's now only on a 5-race contract. So it kind of feels like a big audition at this point for the 2026 season, which is surely more important for Alpine, since obviously you've got this big regulation change coming in. It makes you wonder, is Franco going to be kept on after those 5 races? Are they going to, bring back Doohan for 5 races and keep swapping them over and see what happens? Or are they going to bring in someone totally new and Paul Aron maybe, and use that as an interview for him. Basically, we'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, but then I think because Colapinto's now only on a 5-race basis, the whole problem starts again because clearly they don't have that much faith in him either.
This is the 90s all over again. When they're remember back in the Caitlin would know this. Back in the mid 90s, teams like Lotus and Pacific and Simtech and Jordan in 93 alone, Jordan had 5 drivers in their second entry. They started with Ivan Capelli, who retired after failing to qualify, saying because he just wasn't there. Then Thierry Boutsen did the majority of the season in 93 in a car that he was too tall for, apparently. Then they had Marco Apicella, who had the second shortest Grand Prix debut, Caitlin.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Yeah, the first was at the 1953 German Grand Prix. I'm afraid I don't have who that was at the off the tip of my tongue, but I can look that up for you. But yeah, people often say Marco Apicella had the shortest Grand Prix career in history. It is not technically true because he was beaten by Ernst Loof, I have just found out, driving a Veritas, who retired after about 6 meters on his only Grand Prix start due to a fuel pump issue. But yeah, going back quickly to the situation with the potential seat sharing between Colapinto and Doohan, if they do indeed decide to keep swapping them over, like some people are suggesting. I think the most recent time I remember that happening was with Manor in 2015, where they kept swapping over between Roberto Merri and Alexander Rossi a few times later on in the season.
Yeah.
There was a sort of similar situation with Toro Rosso in 2017, where they brought back Daniel Kvyat for 1 race after they swapped him out for Pierre Gasly, who had to do the Super Formula final, and then Brennan Hartley came in, and so it has happened before, but it's certainly not ideal. And yeah, to be honest, it's a very Red Bull-like situation, isn't it?
I mean, we're not gonna get another 1994 where there's 46 drivers taking the grid. We're not gonna have that. We're not gonna have 46 drivers on the grid in one of the 20 cars. Going back to that Jordan thing, after Apicella came Emanuele Naspetti, who ran 1 race in Portugal, and then Eddie Irvine in the last 2 races of 1993. This is not new. having like pay drivers like take over partway through a season or even mid-season is not new to the sport. We've seen it many times before. It's just, this one just seems really, what's the word? Shifty.
Yeah,
Like,
it's
really
messy.
shady.
I think we should move on because there are other news stories that we need to talk about, and I am so glad that we don't do this live anymore.
Oh,
Yeah,
no.
good luck editing that, Jack.
I wouldn't be surprised if there's quite a bit on the cutting room floor. Okay, let's talk about some other racing because since the last episode of the show, there have actually been 2 Formula One Grand Prix from the Jeddah Corniche circuit and the Miami Autodrome. And, well, I think the story that's emerged out of the last 2 Formula One races is the fact that Oscar Piastri has rather convincingly taken control of the championship. And let's be honest, it's really all down to the mistakes of Lando Norris and Max Verstappen basically tripping over themselves or tripping over each other. I heard, I think it was Andrew, I was listening to the Intercooler podcast the other day, and Andrew Frankel, I believe it was, described Oscar Piastri as Prost-like. And I think that is a fairly solid assessment of that because he just, he might not necessarily be outright the fastest all the time, but this man has not made mistakes in recent times. He has just done the job at hand, whereas Lando Norris and Max Verstappen have been making quite a few mistakes. For instance, Lando Norris jumping the start at Bahrain and then obviously making his mistakes in his battle with George Russell. Max Verstappen making the mistake at the first corner at Jeddah while battling Oscar Piastri. Lando Norris making a mistake at the first corner at the Miami Grand Prix. And then also the battle between Max Verstappen and Lando Norris later in that Grand Prix, as cracking as it was to watch, probably cost those 2 a chance of winning that race, and Oscar Piastri just picks up the pieces. Now, actually, I think having overtaken Lando Norris's win count. What a performance!
Oscar Piastri is an absolute star. I still don't think he's quite as quick on average as Lando Norris, but it doesn't matter because he's so much cleverer. Like, you watch the battles he's had with Max Verstappen and he has figured out Max's psyche. He has got under his skin. You know, that move that he pulled for the lead in Miami really exemplified what I'm talking about here, where from an outsider's perspective, for someone new to Formula One, it probably didn't look that impressive. It probably looked like Max just made a simple mistake and Oscar came through. But Max made that mistake because Oscar put him there. To explain what I'm talking about, Max Verstappen has developed a bit of a habit recently where he likes to release the brakes when he's alongside someone to force them off the road and go, I was ahead at the apex, I had a right to the corner. Because of the rubbish way that the Formula One rules are being interpreted right now, he is allowed to get away with that time and time again. And that is why Lando Norris has had so many clashes and near misses with Max over the last couple of years, because Max knows that he can get away with this. It reminds me of Lewis Hamilton and Nico Rosberg. You know, Nico was every bit Lewis's equal over a lap or over a race distance. But if Lewis started on pole and Nico started in second, Lewis would force Nico off the track about 100% of the time, and Nico would never do the same thing in return, so Lewis would end up coming off better. Max Verstappen has very much done the same thing, but Oscar is wise to it. He knows that if he makes it look as if Max can force him off the road, and then he ducks underneath him right as Max is going wide, he can make those moves stick quickly and decisively. And honestly, I cheered when I saw his move in Miami because it was like seeing your playground bully get his comeuppance. It was amazing.
Good analogy.
As for Lando Norris, he hasn't figured it out yet. He may say these things in interviews. He may say, Max keeps getting away with this. He can't keep getting away with this. Don't let him. You know, clearly you don't have to. Clearly, there was even a time where he absolutely could have overtaken him the conventional way, but then ran off the road while trying to give Max a piece of his own medicine. And that was just totally unnecessary. And in all that time, Oscar was getting a 8-9 second lead. Lando ended up bringing back about 5 seconds of that, but by that point, it was too late. So honestly, Lando could have won in Miami. He had every opportunity to, but Oscar was smarter. He works smarter, not harder, and he gets the win simply as a result of that. So yeah, I'm a big fan of the way that Oscar Piastri drives and the way that he races. I think that is how you race in the modern day and age, without being a bully like Max Verstappen.
Chris,
hot take.
As if we haven't had enough of those already.
I think. Here's my hot take. I think that Oscar Piastri is going to win a world championship before Lando does.
I mean, he's made a pretty convincing argument as to why that will be the case.
And you know what? Who was it, Caitlin, that you compared him to?
What, like Alain Prost, or?
Yeah, like Prost, or was it Jack?
Yeah.
You know what? Actually, I should say I borrowed that comparison from Andrew Frankel at the Intercooler. That's a good podcast, by the way. I just come on here and plug other podcasts. But anyway, right, yeah.
Watch ours too. Watch ours, but after you watch ours.
Yes.
Anyway, like I kind of compare him a little bit to Heinz-Harald Frentzen in a way.
Okay.
In that, on his day, Frentzen was at times smarter than a lot of the drivers in his era. Frentzen is honestly criminally underrated as a driver. Like the problem with Lando is he's too submissive to be to give Max a taste of his medicine. He's too submissive. He needs to assert himself a little bit more. I just don't think he has it yet. I doubt he will. I think Oscar's gonna, like I said, Oscar's gonna win the world championship before Lando does.
Yeah, I mean, the difference between Frentzen and Piastri is that Frentzen never won a championship, and I think Piastri now is going to win it this year. There is still a good chance that Lando Norris would win it. There is still an outside chance that Max Verstappen could win it, depending on Red Bull upgrades and things like that. But at this point in time, as of probably the last race, I have changed my opinion on who's going to win the championship. Because I came into this year saying it was Lando's to lose, and I think it is. I think it's Lando's to lose. But at this point, it looks like he's losing it.
Yeah, no. But I will say this. I think there is a bit of a difference. There's one difference that I'm noticing between Lando and Oscar. I think Lando has begun to evolve in the last couple of years into having that championship winning mentality. I think we've seen it in his demeanor change within the last couple of years. So I think the potential for him to win a championship is still there, but there's a little bit more development that needs to happen with Lando's psyche to sort of take on that ultimate winner's mentality that wins Formula One World Championships. It's something that Max Verstappen has, Lewis Hamilton has or had, and Michael Schumacher and Ayrton Senna had in their day as well.
Oh yeah.
But I think Oscar Piastri had it out of the box, and I think that's the difference between the two of them.
And I think, like I said before, and going back to the situation we just talked about, I think him not being signed with Alpine a few years ago was the best thing to happen to him.
I keep seeing tweets about this where people are retweeting that post he made a few years ago. I understand that without my consent, Alpine has put out a message saying that I will be racing for them in 2022 or 2023, and this is not true. That famous quote is now probably one of the most influential in recent history, because if Oscar Piastri had raced for Alpine, it would not have ended well, and I don't know if his career would have ended up getting anywhere.
He's the Oracle.
he has dodged a massive bullet with that.
Yeah.
And
I wonder if he and probably Mark Webber as well knew what like that, because as we discussed earlier, there are people that have come out of Alpine and have all said the same thing, that like this is essentially a sinking ship and it's not going anywhere, be that for cultural reasons or for technical reasons within the team. So I think that there's a possibility that both of them knew, and that's why Oscar Piastri is where he is, and I think he's doing an absolutely amazing job to basically take a convincing control over the Formula One World Championship at the moment.
You know what his season kind of reminds me of a little bit? At the moment, it kind of reminds me a little of Nigel Mansell. In '92. Like, yes, he didn't win 5 races out of the gate. Or how many races did he win out of the gate again? He lost his first one at Monaco, didn't he? 96 in 92?
Yes, yeah, so that would have been 4 in a row in 92.
But he's got that sort of Nigel Mansell type driving style of mostly conservative but aggressive when he needs to, which honestly I like. I've been impressed with him for a while, and if he doesn't win the World Championship when we reconvene in December, I'll be shocked, to be honest.
Surprised, yeah. I also think Max is starting to not panic, but I think there's a bit of an area for concern at the moment. And I think that I first really noticed this at Jeddah, where maybe 2 years ago, he could have let Oscar go at the first corner and then just gotten that place back a couple of laps later. But I think that he knows that McLaren is way stronger than the Red Bull. And I think he knew that if he let that place go, he wasn't getting it back. And ultimately that sort of ruined his race. And I think the same thing, a similar thing was happening at Miami. And yeah, I think Oscar Piastri has played this brilliantly. He's played them both brilliantly. I think Lando and Max were so occupied with trying to beat each other that Piastri's just swooped in and absolutely seized control of the championship.
He's the best driver in the third best car on the grid, and it's starting to show.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like he sees his championship, because this is round 7 or 8 of the year coming up in Imola.
They've done, yeah, it's round 7 in Imola.
He's I think starting to see that his season is starting to, like, that the championship hopes are starting to slip from his grasp.
Yeah. I also think Oscar Piastri would have won the sprint race as well had it not been for Liam Lawson crashing into Fernando Alonso.
Yeah, that was not a very well-timed safety car, I might say.
No, absolutely not. But then also Red Bull made a mistake during that as well, because they released Max into the path of Kimi Antonelli, and that ruined his race as well. Yeah. It's all just kind of unraveling.
That's what I'm saying. Like, the pressure's starting to get to him.
You know what I will say about the sprint? Ironically, because of what we've just been talking about, Miami was actually pretty decent for Alpine. Pierre Gasly initially finished 11th in the sprint, but was promoted to 8th because there were quite a few penalties. Actually, I think he did an awesome job in that one. And then, of course, in the main qualifying, as you said, Jack Doohan out-qualified Pierre Gasly. Sure,
pace.
They didn't end up getting any points from the race, although that was partly due to Doohan's accident. But yeah, I actually think Gasly was pretty good at the weekend. He's been one of the stars of the recent couple of races in Formula One.
That car has pace.
Yeah, it's not a terrible car.
I've seen worse.
They're not joint last anymore. They were joint last with Sauber coming into this round in terms of points, but they've got ahead of Sauber now.
Yeah. Should we move on?
We haven't done our predictions yet. Rah!
Oh my gosh. I'm
going to quickly rattle through mine because I like this bit. I like making predictions so that everyone can come and laugh at me in the next episode. I hope that's okay, Jack.
Yeah, let's do it.
For Emilia-Romagna, in 5th place, I have got Charles Leclerc. I think that the Tifosi will be hoping for better, but I've put Charles Leclerc 5th. 4th place, I've put Max Verstappen because, as you said, his championship challenge is slightly falling apart. He still has an outside shot of it, but it hasn't been going great. 3rd place, I put George Russell. He's been very strong recently. 2nd place, I've got Oscar Piastri. I think everyone's winning streak comes to an end eventually. And 1st place, I've got Lando Norris, because I still think that Lando is slightly quicker than Oscar. And I think that if Max doesn't qualify particularly well and isn't there to force Lando off the track, I think that Lando should still have the upper hand on Piastri. So I have Lando Norris winning it.
Okay. Shall I go next?
Go on.
All right, okay. I'm going to go with Charles Leclerc in 5th. I'm going to go with Lando Norris finishing 4th.
Okay.
I'm just feeling 4th for some reason. Don't really know why. Wouldn't this be a story if the 3rd place that I am thinking happens? I think surely it's Andrea Kimi Antonelli's time to shine. Get him on the podium. 3rd place for Antonelli.
I've predicted that before and I've been wrong, but he is doing very well. Just got his first sprint pole, sorry.
Yeah, I mean, well, you know, it wouldn't be the first
well
time we've been wrong with predictions. True,
he did well in that opening stint.
I then think in 2nd place, I think it's going to be Max Verstappen. As we said, his championship is falling apart a little bit, but in the last few years, Red Bull have been pretty strong at Imola. So maybe some of that form will still be at least residual, and he might be able to get into 2nd place. And I think Oscar Piastri is going to win at Imola. However, given my run of predictions, that is exactly what probably won't happen. Chris, have you made your predictions?
If it's one of those crazy races, it could be anyone. Because we've had, like, I think we're due for like another Hungary 2021, but or is it 22? No, 21.
21 was, I think, when that was when Ocon won in Hungary.
I think Piastri continues his momentum. Scores like a Frentzen-like drive. Leclerc 2nd, Hamilton 3rd.
So we've got 2 for Piastri winning this and 1 for Norris winning it. Interesting. Okay.
Watch this space.
Okay.
Also, right, I want my Ferrari. I want the Ferraris to do well.
And I think it's now onwards and upwards to our next segment, which is what?
I haven't made you a jingle, have I? Oh no! I'm so sorry. I was going to.
We'll get it in post.
I have no excuse. Okay. Miscellaneous stories and points that we missed and therefore recovering now TM. Bing!
Jingle pending. Now, I think that there's a big story that's emerged from the world of BMW as we approach the Spa 24 hours for 2025, because a rather substantial entry has been announced, and that is the number 46 WRT BMW, and I think that gives you a clue as to who is going to be on it. So Valentino Rossi will be racing at the Spa 24 hours, and joining him in the car for an absolutely stacked lineup is Kevin Magnussen and Rene Rast in one car at the Spa 24 hours. That is surely the definition of a stacked lineup.
Yeah, that's going to be one to look out for. I mean, the Spa 24 Hours is a stacked race as it is, and we know how I mean, I've used the word stacked a couple of times already. We know how competitive the WRT team is, especially in 2025. They are the team of the year so far in basically any category. With Magnussen, Rossi, and Rast contending in the number 46, like that's a winner. That car could win.
So I should mention Kevin Magnussen, his Formula One exploits have already been fairly well documented, as has Valentino Rossi's efforts in motorcycle racing, having made the switch to four wheels within the last few years. He's of course also racing under number 46 in the World Endurance Championship as well. And Rene Rast is a 3-time DTM champion. So the respective resumes among these drivers is absolutely incredible, and I'll be very interested to see how this car does at the Spa 24 Hours. BMW also historically, I believe, the most successful manufacturer ever at the Spa 24 Hours. So again, another reason to watch that particular team. NASCAR, Chris, what have you got?
Yes, the NASCAR finale is going to be rotating for 2 years. I believe it's going to be going back to Homestead Miami Speedway.
Wait, isn't that what NASCARs do? They just rotate around a track, you know?
There we go.
Sorry.
I was waiting for that.
I think we've gone 12 because I've in my show notes I put this down as 12B as opposed to 13. We've gone 12B episodes without making a joke like that. So there we go. That brings the end to that. I don't think we've made a joke like that before. Anyway, right now let's
of the new series.
You said NASCAR will be rotating, and I'm like, yeah, they will. Anyway, carry on.
The NASCAR finale will be moving from Phoenix to Miami for 2026, and I think 2027. I'm hearing they're going to be rotating around to different tracks. Ben Kennedy from NASCAR actually also revealed that they won't be considering either a road course or a super speedway for the final race of the year.
I think that's a shame, to be honest.
I think that's
really
actually
do.
I don't think they should be, honestly, because there's too much at stake for a season finale like that. They can't just put it at Daytona. Like, can't just do like a Daytona bookend or Talladega Daytona thing, like, because there's too much going on that weekend.
I think it makes sense to host the final at different tracks, since the final basically decides the championship in NASCAR with their bizarre championship, the chase system and all of that. But yeah, I think road courses are too unique, and super speedways are too there's too many factors, there's too many variables.
They don't know how to drive in the playoffs to begin with.
Yeah, I don't think it would be particularly fair, so that makes sense. But yeah. I do think it makes sense to rotate the tracks, and I think I'm glad they're doing that.
And I like the fact that it's back at Miami.
Yeah, I think Miami's a great track for the season finale. I don't think Phoenix was really I mean, no disrespect to Phoenix as a track, but I think Miami was a better season finale.
They shouldn't have done the problem is they shouldn't have gone to Phoenix. Because, like, it's just Homestead is just better for a finale.
Yeah. There's also another story that's come out of NASCAR as well. Would you care to enlighten us on that? Yeah.
Yep. The on-air talent for the Turner and Amazon Prime Video, their coverage starting at Charlotte, has been revealed, and yes, that was definitely a sentence. That was definitely a coherent sentence. In the booth for the TNT coverage, leading it will be Adam Alexander, who's also working with the CW, along with Dale Earnhardt Jr. as the driver analyst, and Steve Letarte, who both move over from NBC. There's a TNT BR contributor by the name of Mamba Smith, who was also a pit reporter for Fox on their ARCA coverage in recent years. There's also an alt cast as well, which I think is an alternate stream or something. I believe that's what that is. It's got Jeff Burton, who also comes over from NBC, and Larry McReynolds, who comes over for Fox. And the pit reporters are Danielle Trotta, who comes over, I believe, from NASCAR Race Hub on Fox, Marty Snyder from NBC, and Alan Cavanna, who actually used to do coverage for Fox Sports in their Truck Series coverage. So that's your lineup.
There's also been a story out of the world of Formula E. So McLaren, since the last episode, actually announced that they are pulling out of Formula E to go and focus on their hypercar program. We, of course, covered the McLaren hypercar program in depth on the previous episode of the Motorsport Recently Show, and this is a development that has emerged since then. This team was actually previously the Mercedes Formula E team, and that basically brings about the end of miscellaneous stories and points we missed and are therefore covering now TAM Bing. It's now time for some listener comments, and we've actually got some comments to catch up on because we haven't read them out really in a little while. So back on the Red Bull episode that we did, Robin Tails Fighter, regular contributor to the comment section of the show. And in fact, actually all of the comments are from Robin Tails Fighter. So in regards to the Red Bull episode, he said, about the Red Bull second seat discussion, I'm honestly very curious to see what will happen once Max leaves Red Bull. It is well known that he wants to go to Le Mans, and while he is contracted for another few years, he might leave sooner if the FIA keep up with their strict rules and such. Also, thanks for the shout out. If you do remake the livery of the GR86 on a real life car, we talked about that in the Red Bull episode, I'd love to see it happen. It would be the ultimate highlight of my Hot Wheels custom creating career to see something like that happen. He also left a comment on the McLaren LMDH video. And he said, actually, and this is something I sort of missed, and I actually thank you very much for bringing this to my attention, because I somehow this had just gotten lost. I just happened to miss this particular story. He says, actually, the chassis used for LMDH cars aren't LMP2 chassis anymore. The LMP2 regulations have been redone from the ground up, and potential manufacturers are currently designing chassis in the hopes of being selected for the next generation of LMP2 manufacturers. So I actually didn't know, because I understood that originally the LMDH cars, even after they'd started their competitive life, they were actually going to be the new LMP2 chassis. But that has seemingly fallen by the wayside by the looks of things. I think it's because the LMP2 regs kept getting pushed back, and then by the time they would have entered competition, those chassis would have been quite old by that point, I think.
They basically, the way I recall it was actually how the DPI regs as well went. It's based on they basically use the 4 different chassis manufacturers as a base. And then they put their own design cues and tweaks on it, and their own engines and the like. They basically, like, the tub and the chassis itself is actually an Orica or a Ligier or a Multimatic Riley or a what was the fourth one? Anyway, Ginetta, yeah, but no one went for Ginetta or Ligier. Most of the Porsches are built by Multimatic, as will Ford, from what I'm hearing. The Orica ones are Honda, Acura, Alpine, and I think Genesis are running their chassis, and I forget actually what Lamborghini is, but I want to say it's a Ligier base, but don't quote me on that. But yeah, it's basically the base chassis is actually built from those 3 contractors to then. Because that's how the DPI regs used to work as well, where you had the Cadillac was a Dallara. That's it.
No. The Lamborghini is the Ligier.
No. What I'm saying is I was the Cadillac is the Dallara.
Oh, yeah,
So,
right. Sorry,
yeah.
yes.
Because it just got in my head. It basically, like, in DPI, it was basically the Cadillac was a Dallara, the Mazda was a Riley Multimatic, the Acura was the Acura DPI was an Orica, and the Nissan, the short-lived Nissan project was a Ligier. They basically build their car around that particular chassis. Is my understanding of the rules in LMDH.
Yeah. And of course those chassis were originally going to be the LMP2 chassis, but those chassis are not LMP2 cars anymore. So really they are effectively just LMDH chassis as opposed to bespoke chassis that were made by the manufacturer. Anyway, I can understand why some people find this very confusing. But anyway, thank you for your regular contributions, Robin Tails Fighter.
We need to invite him on the show.
Yes, we do, and he actually did say something about that. He says, "Don't worry, Chris, I'll get in touch about joining eventually once life gets a little less busy." So there you go. That concludes listener comments. Unfortunately, we do have to end the episode. Well, actually, on a very somber note. It is unfortunate in the world of motorsport that we lose members of this community, both in terms of having lived their full lives, but also under tragic circumstances as well. And unfortunately, the last week has presented both of those cases. Unfortunately, within the last week, we've lost Jochen Mass. We lost Owen, Jenna, and Shane Richardson in a British Supersport event, and we lost Lauren O'Brien as well. Condolences to all of the family and friends of those individuals, and unfortunately, we have to end the episode on a somber note. But we hope that all of those individuals will be remembered fondly.
Our thoughts, of course, go to the families of those that have lost competitors out there, have lost loved ones. I will say the Owen Jenner, the last thing he posted was a Facebook post regarding his father. Wishing him a happy birthday. When I saw that, and I don't think I'm alone in saying that, it broke me. Also, I do have a medical update here on the third person that was severely injured in the accident, Tom Tunstall, and I'm going to read the statement here from the British Superbike Championships Facebook post. We can confirm that Tom Tunstall has sustained a broken bone in his neck and is currently under the care of a team of specialists at Royal Stoke Hospital. While his condition is serious, he is stable and receiving the best possible treatment. Doctors are closely monitoring his progress and will determine in the coming days whether surgery is necessary. At this time, a slow but hopefully full recovery is expected. And in the accident, like to have someone make a full recovery like that, we wish Tom and his family a very quick and full, safe recovery. And Caitlin, do you want to say something about Jochen Mass?
Yeah, so obviously it's one of those really tragic weekends that motorsport seems to throw up sometimes, where you lose multiple people, some that you know, some that you don't. Jochen Mass, of course, we lost a few days ago. It's always a bittersweet feeling when someone who has lived a full life passes away, because obviously it's tragic that they have passed away, but also you get to celebrate their life, their many achievements. And Jochen Mass was not short of achievements. You know, he won the Le Mans 24 Hours in 1989. He, of course, has a Grand Prix victory to his name, 1975 Spanish Grand Prix. And I was very glad to see that McLaren posted a tribute to him on their Twitter account, because it was for McLaren who he won that race, which was also quite a tragic affair. But then, of course, you do get the riders and drivers who were taken too young. You've already spoken enough about the British Supersport accident. I believe I have a poster somewhere, unfortunately not on me, so I couldn't show it. But I believe that last year, when I went to the British Superbikes meeting at Donington, I got a signed poster from Shane Richardson. And I'm definitely going to try to, I believe it'll be at my mum's house. So I'm going to try to get her to dig that out. Because that will be a stark reminder of the person behind the name. And also, Jack and Chris, you may have noticed me slip Lauren O'Brien's name into the tribute section on the document that we're using. And I know you probably won't know who that was. Chris, you mentioned how I've competed in motorsport in the past. I competed in a sport called autograss. And unfortunately, the autograss community was also hit by a tragedy at the weekend when 13-year-old Lauren O'Brien unfortunately died while competing in Cork in Ireland. And like I said, it's just one of those weekends that motorsport seems to throw up sometimes when things like this keep happening. But you got to remember, these people died doing what they loved, and they're going to be remembered for their achievements and for their life. And, you know, it's very easy for us to read off names on a page, but when you really see these people doing what they do, then you realize the people who are the racers who make up this community. So, yeah, rest in peace to Jochen Mass, the legend that he is, and of course, taken too young were Owen Jenner, Shane Richardson, and Lauren O'Brien.
And on that note, it is time to end. My name has been Jack McKenzie, and I've been joined on the mic today by Chris Whitfield and Caitlin Penny commentary, and you have been listening to the Motorsport Recently Show. Goodbye, and we'll see you in the next episode.